The crystal spires of Lumina caught the light of the dying sun, sending rainbow patterns across the empty streets of the capital city. Princess Aurora stood at her window, watching the last transport ships leave the planet's atmosphere. Her long silver hair reflected the golden sunset, and her iridescent skin shimmered with the characteristic glow of her species. But today, that glow was dim. "Your Highness," the computer's soft voice broke the silence. "The plague has reached the outer districts. We have less than 6 hours before it arrives at the palace." Aurora turned away from the window, her steps echoing through the empty throne room. The plague had taken everything from her: her parents, her people, and soon it would take her world. But she refused to let it take the future. "Begin the cryostasis preparation sequence," she commanded, walking towards the hidden elevator behind the throne. The floor opened silently, revealing a crystal platform that would take her deep beneath the mountain. As she descended, Aurora thought about the plague that had destroyed her civilization. It had started 3 months ago on a distant mining colony. At first, they thought it was just a computer virus, but it was something far worse. The plague corrupted both living tissue and machine code, turning everything it touched into a strange, lifeless crystal. Their most advanced AI systems couldn't stop it. Their best scientists couldn't cure it. The elevator stopped at a massive vault door. Aurora pressed her hand against it, and her royal DNA signature made it swing open. Inside was humanity's last hope, though she didn't know it yet. The bunker was a marvel of Luminan engineering. Curved walls made of pure crystal housed the most advanced technology her people had ever created. In the center stood a single cryopod, its surface decorated with the royal family symbols. "Starting medical scan," the computer announced. Multiple beams of light passed over Aurora's body, preparing royal genetic archive. "Beginning memory crystal encoding." Aurora removed her crown and placed it on a nearby pedestal. She wouldn't need it where she was going. Her simple white dress shimmered as she walked to the cryopod. "Warning," the computer's voice carried a note of urgency. "Plague detection systems report faster progression than anticipated. 4 hours until contamination reaches this facility." "How long will I sleep?" Aurora asked, even though she knew the answer. She just needed to hear it one last time. "The cryostasis pod is programmed to maintain your vital functions until a cure for the plague is discovered, or until a sufficiently advanced civilization capable of helping finds this facility. The pod's power crystal has enough energy to last 1,000 years." Aurora touched the smooth surface of the cryopod. "And if no one comes, then you will be the last memory of our people, preserved forever in perfect stasis." Tears fell from Aurora's eyes, turning into tiny crystals before they hit the floor. A trait of her species. She collected them in her hand, each one containing a fragment of her genetic memory, and placed them in a small compartment within the pod. "Your Highness," the computer said softly, "it's time." Aurora stepped into the cryopod. As the crystal surface began to close around her, she saw the plague's corruption beginning to creep down the elevator shaft. Beautiful and terrible crystalline formations that consumed everything they touched. "Sleep well, Princess Aurora," the computer said. "The security systems will protect you. When you wake, I hope you find a universe worthy of our legacy." The cryostasis field activated, and Aurora's consciousness began to fade. Her last thought was of the future, of who might find her, and what the universe would be like when she opened her eyes again. As the plague consumed the world above, Aurora slept, untouched by time. The computer maintained its vigil, waiting for someone worthy to find its precious cargo. It would take 300 years before a curious human explorer would stumble upon this tomb of crystal and light, but that was a story for another day. Deep in her frozen sleep, Aurora dreamed of stars she had never seen and worlds she had never visited, while her civilization's greatest achievements slumbered in her genetic memory, waiting to be awakened. James Mitchell stood at the viewport of his research vessel, staring at the crystal world below. Lumina was nothing like the pictures in the history books. The entire planet sparkled like a diamond in space, its surface covered in crystalline formations that stretched for miles into the sky. Recording log entry, he spoke into his wrist computer. Day 47 of expedition. Finally reached Lumina after 3 months of space travel. The legends don't do it justice. His ship, the Curiosity, was small compared to military vessels, but it was perfect for exploration. As a xenorchaeologist, James had visited many dead worlds, but Lumina was different. It was the crown jewel of a lost civilization, a mystery that had puzzled humanity for generations. The ship's AI spoke up. Surface scan complete. Atmosphere is breathable, but I recommend wearing your environmental suit as a precaution. Temperature is -10 degrees Celsius. James checked his equipment one last time. His dark brown hair was messy from wearing his helmet, but he didn't care. Discovery wasn't about looking pretty. He made sure his scanner was working and his oxygen tanks were full. Beginning descent, the AI announced. Landing zone selected near what appears to be an ancient city center. The ship landed softly on a flat crystal surface. James took a deep breath and stepped into the airlock. When the outer door opened, he got his first real look at Lumina's surface. Everything was crystal. The ground crunched under his boots like walking on mirror shards. Huge buildings rose into the sky, their surfaces reflecting the light of Lumina's sun in rainbow patterns. But something was odd about them. These aren't ruins, James muttered into his recorder. These buildings, they're perfectly preserved. It's like everyone just disappeared and left everything behind. He walked through empty streets, his scanner beeping steadily. 300 years ago, this had been one of the most advanced civilizations in known space. Then, in less than a year, they vanished. Some said it was a war. Others blamed a disease. No one knew for sure. The scanner's beeping suddenly changed pitch. Energy reading detected, it announced. Source: underground, approximately 2 kilometers away. Signature matches luminant power crystals. James's heart began to beat faster. Active power after 300 years. That was impossible. The history books said everything on Lumina was dead. He followed the signal to the base of a mountain. The crystal formations here were different. Darker, almost scary. They'd branched out like frozen lightning, covering everything in sharp, jagged patterns. These must be traces of whatever destroyed this place, James said into his recorder. They look almost infected. The energy signal led him to what looked like a solid crystal wall. But when he got closer, he noticed tiny symbols etched into its surface. They glowed faintly when he touched them. Incredible, he whispered. Active tech after all this time. Suddenly, the wall lit up with bright blue light. A beam shot out and scanned his body from head to toe. A voice spoke in perfect English. Biological entity detected. Species: human. Threat level: minimal. Processing. James held his breath. First contact protocol said to stay still when alien tech was scanning you. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his helmet. Access granted, the voice said. Welcome, explorer. You are the first sentient being to reach this facility in 300 years. The crystal wall disappeared, revealing a long corridor leading down into the mountain. Lights came on automatically, illuminating a path deeper underground. James activated his emergency beacon, sending his location to his ship. If something happened to him, at least they'd know where to look. Then, with the excitement of discovery overcoming his fear, he stepped into the corridor. Beginning descent into unknown facility, he recorded. If anyone finds this log, well, wish me luck. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to make the greatest archaeological discovery in human history and wake up a princess who had been sleeping for 3 centuries. The underground facility hummed with power as James made his way deeper into the mountain. His flashlight beam bounced off crystal walls, creating dancing patterns of light. After 20 minutes of walking, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber that took his breath away. Recording new log entry, He whispered into his wrist computer. I found some kind of bunker. The technology here is incredible. Everything still works after 3 centuries. In the center of the chamber stood a tall crystal pod, glowing with soft blue light. As James approached, he could see someone inside, a figure floating in what looked like liquid light. The facility's computer spoke again. Human presence confirmed. Beginning revival sequence. Revival sequence. James stepped back, startled. Wait, there's someone alive in there. The pod's surface became transparent, revealing a woman with silver hair and iridescent skin. Her simple white dress floated around her as if she was underwater. James stood frozen, unable to believe his eyes. Revival sequence at 25%. The computer announced. Warning. Subject may be disoriented upon awakening. Please maintain distance. James watched in amazement as the liquid light began to drain from the pod. The woman's feet gently touched the bottom, and her eyes started to move under their closed lids. Revival sequence at 75%. Restoring neural functions, reactivating genetic memory banks. The pod's crystal surface split down the middle and opened like a flower. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that shimmered like opals. She took her first breath in 300 years. And then she screamed. The sound echoed through the chamber as she stumbled forward, caught off guard by her weak legs. James rushed to help her, forgetting all about first contact protocols. Easy there, he said softly, helping her stand. You're okay. You're safe. Aurora stared at the strange being holding her up. His skin wasn't iridescent like hers, and he wore some kind of protective suit. But his eyes were kind, and his grip was gentle. Who? What are you? She asked, her voice rough from centuries of silence. I'm James Mitchell, a human explorer, he answered, speaking slowly and clearly. I found your facility while studying the ruins of Lumina. Ruins? Aurora pulled away from him, looking around frantically. Computer, status report. Current date is Earth calendar year 2325. The computer responded. You have been in stasis for 302 years, 147 days, 13 hours. The plague has been dormant for approximately 298 years. No cure was found, but the threat has passed. Aurora's legs gave out, and she sat heavily on the crystal floor. James knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance. I'm the last one, aren't I? She asked quietly. The last Luminan we've ever found, James confirmed gently. But your civilization's legacy lives on. Humanity has learned so much from studying your worlds. Aurora looked at him with new interest. Humanity. I remember reading about your species. You were just beginning to reach the stars when... Her voice trailed off. When the plague hit, James finished. We were too primitive to be affected by it. By the time we developed advanced enough technology, the plague was gone. And now you explore the stars, Aurora said, a small smile appearing on her face. Tell me, James Mitchell, what has humanity discovered in my sleep? Before he could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the facility. The computer's voice was urgent. Warning. Multiple unidentified vessels entering orbit. Energy signatures match known radar configurations. James stood quickly, offering his hand to Aurora. We need to go. My ship isn't far, and it can outrun raiders. Aurora took his hand, surprised by how warm it felt. The facility's defenses are 300 years old. James finished. Please, trust me. I know this is all overwhelming, but right now we need to move. Aurora looked at his offered hand, then at his face. In his eyes, she saw something familiar, the same determination she'd seen in her people's eyes long ago. Lead the way, James Mitchell, she said, taking his hand. It seems my new life is already full of excitement. James and Aurora ran through the crystal corridors, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Aurora was struggling to keep up, her muscles still weak from centuries of sleep. Without a word, James slowed his pace to match hers. Computer, Aurora called out as they reached the main entrance. Initiate emergency protocols. Seal all sensitive areas. Acknowledged, Your Highness. Facility lockdown initiated. Warning. 3 vessels have landed near your location. Armed individuals detected. James checked his wrist computer. My ship is about half a kilometer away. Can you run that far? Aurora straightened her back, showing a hint of her royal bearing. I may be weak, but I'm still a Luminan. We're stronger than we look. They emerged from the mountain into the harsh sunlight. Aurora gasped at the sight of her world. Where there had once been gleaming towers of pure crystal, now stood twisted formations covered in dark, plague-scarred growths. The beautiful capital city of her memories was now an alien landscape. Stay close, James whispered, pulling her behind a large crystal formation. Raiders up ahead. Through the transparent crystal, they could see 3 figures in dark combat suits searching the area. Their weapons were primitive by Luminan standards, but deadly enough. Why are they here? Aurora whispered. Probably looking for Luminan tech to sell, James explained. The black market pays fortune for working artifacts from your civilization. The irony wasn't lost on Aurora. Her people's achievements, once freely shared with allies, were now treasures to be stolen. A blast hit the crystal near them, sending sharp fragments flying. They'd spotted us. James pulled out a small energy pistol. Run when I tell you. He fired 3 quick shots, forcing the raiders to take cover. Now, head for that ridge. They ran across the open ground, crystal shards crunching under their feet. Aurora's legs burned, but she pushed through the pain. More energy blasts flew past them, turning crystals into steam where they hit. There's my ship. James pointed to a sleek vessel ahead of them, just a little further. Suddenly, Aurora stumbled and fell. James turned back, helping her up as energy bolts zinged past them. When he looked at her face, he saw tears in her eyes. I can't, she gasped. Everything's changed, my whole world. I know, he said softly, even as the raiders got closer. But you're not alone. You have a chance to see a new world now. Please, don't give up. Something in his words reached her. Aurora took a deep breath and nodded. Together, they made the final sprint to James's ship. Curiosity, emergency launch sequence. James shouted as they reached the airlock. The ship's engines hummed to life. Once inside, Aurora collapsed into a seat while James took the controls. The ship lifted off just as the raiders reached their position. Their weapons couldn't penetrate the ship's shields. As they broke through Lumina's atmosphere, Aurora got her first view of space in 3 centuries. The stars looked the same, but everything else had changed. Where once there had been busy shipping lanes and orbital stations, now there was only empty space and debris. I've signaled the Earth Defense Fleet, James said, checking his instruments. They'll deal with the raiders. We're safe now. Aurora touched the viewport, watching her world shrink behind them. Where will we go? Earth, if you'd like, James offered. Or any other world. Humanity has colonies on 7 planets now. We're not as advanced as your people were, but we're getting there. Tell me about Earth, Aurora said quietly. Tell me about what humanity has built while I slept. James smiled and set the ship on autopilot. As they flew through the star-filled darkness, he told her about Earth's gleaming cities, its struggles and triumphs, its dreams of reaching further into space. Aurora listened, finding hope in humanity's achievements. Maybe, she said finally, the universe didn't forget us after all. It just needed time to raise new guardians for the stars. Earth's bright lights sparkled below as James's ship entered the atmosphere. Aurora pressed her face against the viewport, amazed by the planet's transformation. Where once there had been primitive cities, now stood towering structures that reached into the clouds. Welcome to New Washington, James said as they approached a massive spaceport, Earth's capital and home to the Interstellar Science Division. The ship landed smoothly in a private dock. Through the windows, Aurora could see a small group of people waiting for them. She straightened her white dress nervously. "Don't worry," James assured her. "Director Thomas is a friend. He'll make sure you're treated with respect." When they stepped out of the ship, Aurora's appearance caused a stir. Her iridescent skin caught the sunlight, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the dock. The waiting scientists whispered among themselves. Director Thomas, a tall man with gray hair, stepped forward. "Princess Aurora, welcome to Earth. We've prepared special quarters for you in the research wing." "Thank you," Aurora said politely, but stayed close to James. Everything was so different. The air smelled strange, the gravity felt slightly wrong, and the sounds of the city were overwhelming. In her quarters, Dr. Lisa Reed ran several medical scans while James and Director Thomas watched. The equipment beeped steadily as it analyzed Aurora's unique biology. Suddenly, all the screens lit up with strange patterns. Dr. Reed gasped. "This is incredible. Her genetic structure. It's like nothing we've ever seen." "What do you mean?" James asked, stepping closer. "Her DNA isn't just carrying biological information," Dr. Reed explained excitedly. "It's storing data, massive amounts of it, like a living computer." Aurora nodded slowly. "The genetic memory banks. All members of the royal family carried them. Our most important knowledge, encoded into our very beings." Director Thomas leaned forward. "What kind of knowledge?" "Everything," Aurora said quietly. "Scientific discoveries, technological blueprints, cultural records, even the location of other luminant facilities across the galaxy." The room fell silent as everyone realized what this meant. Aurora carried within her the collected wisdom of one of the most advanced civilizations ever known. With access to this knowledge, Director Thomas said carefully, humanity could advance centuries ahead of schedule. Our problems with energy, space travel, medicine, we could solve them all. But James noticed Aurora's expression. "What's wrong?" "This knowledge." Aurora stood up from the medical bed. "My people didn't give it to me to simply hand over. I need to know it will be used wisely." She walked to the window, looking out at the city. "I see much of my people in humanity. The curiosity, the drive to explore, but I also see our mistakes. The pride that made us think we could control everything. The arrogance that led to our fall." James joined her at the window. "What would you suggest?" "A partnership," Aurora said firmly. "I will share what I know, but gradually. Help guide humanity away from the mistakes my people made. We need to be careful. Some technologies aren't worth the risk." Director Thomas started to protest, but James held up his hand. "She's right. We've only had space travel for a century. We're still learning. Having a guide who knows the dangers would be invaluable." Aurora smiled at him gratefully. Looking back at the others, she said, "Let me teach you about clean energy first. Show me you can use that wisdom well, and we'll move forward together." As the scientists began discussing plans, James noticed Aurora's hand trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" "Just tired," she whispered, "and a little scared. I hold so much power in my genes. What if someone decides not to wait for my guidance?" James's expression grew serious. "Then I'll help protect you. You're not alone anymore, remember?" Aurora nodded, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded her of home. She had woken to a changed universe, but perhaps this was where she was meant to be all along, a bridge between the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. 2 weeks after Aurora's arrival on Earth, things had settled into a routine. Each morning, she worked with scientists, sharing carefully chosen pieces of luminant knowledge. Each afternoon, James showed her more of Earth, helping her understand her new home. But on this particular evening, something felt wrong. "The security cameras are offline," James said, rushing into Aurora's lab. "We need to move. Now." Aurora looked up from the clean energy prototype she was helping design. "What's happening?" Before James could answer, the lights went out. Emergency red lighting filled the room, casting strange shadows on the walls. "Breach in Sector 7, the building's AI announced." Unknown hostiles have entered the facility. James pulled out his energy pistol. Someone leaked information about your genetic memories. There's a group called the Accelerators. They believe humanity should take alien technology by force. Aurora's heart raced as she remembered the raiders on Lumina. They're here for me. Not if I can help it. James pressed his hand against a wall panel, revealing a hidden door. Director Thomas had this escape route built just in case. Come on. They hurried through the narrow passage as sounds of fighting echoed through the building. Aurora could hear energy weapons firing and people shouting. Almost there, James whispered. The tunnel leads to a secure hangar. We have a ship waiting. An explosion rocked the tunnel, sending them stumbling. Through the dust, 4 figures in black combat suits appeared. Don't move, the leader ordered, pointing an advanced weapon at them. We just want the alien. No one needs to get hurt. James stepped in front of Aurora. She's not just a database you can download. The knowledge has to be shared willingly. Then we'll find another way to extract it, the leader said coldly. The human race can't wait centuries while she decides what we're ready for. Aurora touched James's shoulder gently, then stepped forward. You remind me of someone, she said to the leader. A scientist from my time. He thought he could force the universe to give up its secrets. What happened to him? The leader asked, despite himself. His impatience helped create the plague that destroyed my civilization. Aurora's skin began to glow brighter, filling the tunnel with silvery light. Would you risk the same fate? The leader hesitated. In that moment, James acted. He fired 3 quick shots, hitting the lights and plunging the tunnel into darkness. But in the darkness, Aurora's glowing skin made her an easy target. A blast from the leader's weapon headed straight for her. James dove, pushing her out of the way. The blast caught him in the shoulder, and he fell with a cry of pain. James. Aurora knelt beside him. Looking up at the attackers, her fear turned to anger. Her skin blazed like a star, forcing them to shield their eyes. You want to see Luminan power? She asked, her voice echoing strangely. Watch carefully. She pressed her hand against the wall. Instantly, crystal began growing from her touch, spreading like ice across the tunnel's surface. The attackers fired blindly, but the crystal absorbed their weapons' energy, growing faster. What's happening? One of them shouted as crystal started forming around their feet. A simple security measure, Aurora said calmly. The crystal will hold you until authorities arrive. Non-lethal, but quite effective. My people didn't believe in unnecessary violence. Soon, the attackers were trapped in crystal up to their waists. Security forces, led by Director Thomas himself, arrived moments later. As medics treated James's wound, he looked up at Aurora with a mix of pain and pride. That was amazing. But how did you do it? Aurora smiled sadly. There's still so much you don't know about my people. Some of it wonderful, some of it dangerous. That's why we have to be careful. She took his hand. That's why I need people like you, to help me make the right choices. We'll find a balance, James promised. Together. 1 year after Aurora's awakening, the new Washington skyline had changed. A gleaming crystal tower now stood among the steel and glass buildings, its surface catching the morning light, just like the spires of old Lumina. Aurora stood at the tower's top, watching the sunrise. Her quarters had been designed to remind her of home, with crystal formations growing from the walls and ceiling. But unlike the dark crystals of plague-ravaged Lumina, these shone with pure, healthy light. The latest test results are in, James said, entering the room. His shoulder had long since healed, leaving only a small scar. The clean energy systems are working better than anyone expected. 10 cities are already running on crystal power. Aurora smiled. And the safety protocols. Triple-checked, just like you insisted. James joined her at the window. The scientists are starting to understand why you're so careful about sharing technology. Below them, the city was coming to life. Flying vehicles moved between buildings in orderly lines, their crystal-powered engines humming quietly. People walked the streets without fear of energy shortages or pollution. It was a small step, but an important one. Director Thomas sent a message. James continued. The World Council has approved your proposal for the Stellar Academy. Aurora's eyes lit up. The Academy had been her dream. A place where humans could learn about luminant science and culture safely, under proper guidance. When can we start? They're ready whenever you are. James hesitated. There's something else. The deep space probes found another luminant facility, out near the Centauri system. Aurora's heart skipped a beat. Like mine. Similar energy signature. Could be another stasis pod. James touched her hand gently. We don't have to go if you're not ready. Aurora looked around her quarters, at the life she'd built here. For the past year, she'd focused on helping humanity while dealing with her own loss. The thought of finding another survivor was both thrilling and frightening. No, she said finally. We should go. Whether we find another survivor or just more of my people's knowledge, it needs to be protected. She squeezed James's hand. Will you come with me? Try and stop me, he grinned. The curiosity's already being prepared. But what about the Academy? The first class can study the clean energy systems while we're gone. Dr. Reed can handle their training. Aurora turned from the window to face him. It's time I stopped hiding in this tower and started exploring again. James's expression grew serious. The accelerators are still out there, and there might be other groups who want to take shortcuts to advancement. Let them try. Aurora's skin shimmed with quiet confidence. I'm not the same scared princess who just woke up anymore. And I'm not alone. She waved her hand, and the crystals in the room shifted, forming a three-dimensional map of nearby star systems. My people spent too long living in fear of another disaster. We forgot that fear shouldn't stop us from moving forward. It should just teach us to move forward wisely. James watched the star map spinning slowly in the air. So what's our next step? We find any other survivors, Aurora said firmly. We protect what knowledge we can. And most importantly, she smiled at him. We help humanity reach the stars safely, one discovery at a time. Together, James asked, returning her smile. Together. As they stood in the crystal tower, watching Earth's sun rise over a city powered by ancient wisdom and new hope, Aurora thought about her long sleep. Those 300 years hadn't been a curse, sending her into a future where everything she knew was gone. They had been a gift, letting her sleep until the universe had prepared new guardians for the legacy of the stars. The lost princess had finally found her place, not in the past she'd left behind, but in the future she would help build.